This is take 2 of the video because the first time I did the whole recording while not realizing that I was wearing a green shirt. So when I put it into edit, I was a floating head, which would have been funny the whole time, but was a little bit distracting. So I'm just doing it again. Welcome. This is Aaron Talks, or I don't know if I'm going to title it that. Anyway, welcome. Welcome. Usually I like to put myself together before I do these, but showering sounds like it requires a lot of energy and I don't really feel like it. So Ugly Pajama Aaron is here. Yay. Hello. Hello. Let's talk about the JLPT. The JLPT, otherwise known as the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, otherwise known as the Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken in Japanese, which is a direct translation. Nihongo is Japanese language. No Ryoku means ability, capability, and in this case, proficiency. And then Shiken means test. So there you go. Nihongo no Ryoku Shiken, Japanese language proficiency test. This is the only Japanese proficiency test that I'm familiar with. I've taken it twice at the N4 and N3 levels. I'll tell you more about those later. But regardless, if you're studying Japanese, this is an important thing to keep in your mind. So it all depends on what your goals with Japanese are. Are they entirely interest-based? Do you want to watch anime in the original dub? Do you want to read manga in the original Japanese? Do you want to understand more Japanese literature or music, things like that? If it's entirely interest-based and you don't see yourself, interacting with Japanese or Japanese people on a day-to-day basis or in like a business setting, then perhaps you don't need this test. Then it's really easy for you to set your own markers, your own milestones of like, oh, I could listen to most of this anime without looking up the words, or I can mostly understand what people are saying in this J-drama. If that's your goal, then that's great. That's perfect. It's beautiful. Learning a language is never a bad thing, no matter how you do it. So that's good. The JLPT comes in if you're looking for business opportunities or academic opportunities, or you just want like a marker, like a physical marker. You don't necessarily know what you want to do with Japanese, but you want like something to aim for, a signpost that you can go towards. If you're one of those kinds of people, then the JLPT might be right for you. There are 5 levels of the JLPT. There's the N5, the N4, the N3, the N2, and the N1. And they get progressively harder in ascending order. So that means that the easiest is the N5, and then the hardest is the N1. And then your proficiency is obviously shown to be better at each level. How it was explained to me kind of is N5 is pretty much you are aware of the Japanese language. You can read hiragana and katakana and maybe 1 or 2 kanji. It's very basic, very rudimentary, and most people actually skip it. So keep that in mind. Maybe you want to save the money and not take that level. N4 is maybe you've got a foothold into Japanese. You can hold a simple conversation about what you like, where you're from, what you want to do, that sort of thing. And so that's like a good starting point. That's where I started. There's a big jump from N4 to N3. And when you get to N3, how I see it is you're fluent in very basic Japanese, which means that you can understand a lot and you can say a lot, but it's all very basic. Maybe it's not flowery. Obviously, you can't speak poetry. You can't do really nuanced meanings and stuff like that. You can really just convey meaning well. What you want, what you need. At that level, you can call and make hotel reservations, things like that. You can, get your car fixed. You can do that. I mean, you're not going to wow anybody with your amazing complex speech patterns, but you can get what you need. At that level, you can definitely live pretty okay in Japan. You probably still want somebody who is fluent in Japanese that can help, but for most things in life, you can do it yourself. Last year, I passed the N3 JLPT, so I'm a little bit above that level, somewhere in between N3 and N2. So I'm working on it, and yeah, hope you'll join me on that journey. So there's a big jump from N3 to N2, and N2 is a really big deal. That's probably the biggest deal, and that's where a lot of people stop and where a lot of people shoot for. N2 means that you are very good at Japanese, period. You're not anywhere near native level, but you are good at Japanese. Well done. You can talk to people and you can talk about complex subjects, that kind of thing. Another thing about the N2 level is that if you want to work at a Japanese company in Japan, like fully office worker, toast in the mouth, late for work, running, that kind of thing, then most of them require you to have an N2 level. Not an N1, just an N2. As I mentioned before, a lot of people stop at N2, and that's because it's all they need. Once you get that stamp of certification and you get hired by a Japanese company, what do you care about your proficiency certification? Maybe you get super fluent and you could pass the N1, but you don't need to. You already work for the company. And then talking about N1, N1 is the last level. And in N1, you'll get some like weird poetic language and stuff like that. One of my coworkers, when I worked in Japan, was working towards the N1 level. And sometimes he would show me his flashcards and they would be bizarre words like why would anyone need to know that? Hold on. Yeah, okay. So one time he showed me that like one of the expected like words to know for the JLPT N1 was this word, which was tsujigiri, which is quite literally a noun meaning killing a passerby in order to test your new sword. Let me say that again. Killing a passerby to test your new sword. Very important, very applicable to daily life nowadays. But so you'll get a lot of weird stuff like that. I was talking to a bartender once and I mentioned that and she said, well, maybe I couldn't even pass that and I'm Japanese. So that's the kind of thing you can expect there. Maybe it's not exactly needed for you and that's perfectly fine. No worries, man. Just stop at that N2 and work in that Japanese company. You're good. The only other language proficiency test I have experience with is the German one. I took a language proficiency test in Germany when I lived in Heidelberg, and it was very different than the JLPT. So in the German test, they tested you on all 4 areas of language, which are reading, listening, writing, and speaking. You have 2 passives. The 2 passive forms are reading and listening, and then the 2 active forms are speaking and writing. There was a section of the test for each of those. There was an essay to test writing. There was a reading section, kind of like, standardized test style where you like read a paragraph and bubble in questions about that. That was for reading. For listening, they like just played like an audio thing and then I had to like bubble in more things. And then for speaking, it was terrifying. They like kind of locked you in this room and gave you this sheet of paper and it was all written and it was this complicated like thing about foot traffic on a main road. And I was like staring at that like, I don't know. So I was reading that and then they would drag you into another room with a partner who was also taking the test. And then you had to talk to each other about the article you just read. And like my partner was this like Italian girl who had been living in Germany for like 5 years and she was like so fluent. And so she was just like, she would just all in just like wonderful German. And then I would be like, jawohl. Stimme dazu. I mean, I did fine. I ended up scoring really well, but I just got like the most advanced partner I could have asked for, which was a blessing because it made the conversation like really good, and also a curse in that like she just made me look bad, but it was fun. Okay, stories aside, when you take the JLPT, they only test you on 2 things, 2 of the 4 forms of language of communication. They test you on your reading and your listening. Let me say that again. They test you on your reading and your listening. You do not have to say a single word of Japanese in order to pass these. You do not have to write a single kanji, a single letter of Japanese in order to take and write these exams. So technically speaking, this is like pure theoretical. Technically speaking, you could pass the N1 level, the highest proficiency certificate offered in Japanese, without speaking or writing a word of Japanese. That is technically possible. Obviously, that's a bad idea because if you've interacted with language before, you know that each portion, each form of the 4 things, they all feed into each other. And so when you hear something, it like supports what you write, and what you write supports what you remember and can say. Like they all work in tandem, and it really helps you to remember to interact with all forms of writing for a single word or a single concept. Each level of the Japanese language proficiency test has a different sections to it, but each one kind of has the same areas. And so there's always a kanji area, which revolves around you remembering kanji meanings, readings, and also pretty specifically what they look like. Some of the very mean questions are they'll put kanjis next to each other that look almost exactly the same except for one radical difference or something like that. And you have to try and remember, oh, which one of these is it? Which one of these is the real one for this reading? And those are really difficult, at least for me. They'll have a vocabulary section where you just have to remember words. What do these words mean? And usually in that section, they don't use any kanji, and they only use hiragana, so the kanji can't give you, hints on what the meaning is. There's also a reading section where you read stuff, short form reading. There's also long form reading, and then listening. And some of the listenings are longer, and you have to like remember different things about the conversations, and some of them are very short where you fill in the next conversation. A long form conversation might be between like a boss and a coworker, and they have this full conversation, and then at the end it asks you, like, what time does the worker need to come into work tomorrow? And it's like 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. and you have to remember the conversation and if they changed it in the conversation or things like that. And then the short forms, one of the forms of that is like a fill in the blank. So you'll have like a 2-line conversation where someone says like, hey, where do you want to go today? And the other person goes like, oh, I want to go to the aquarium today. And then you have to fill in the last part of the conversation, and your options are like, yes, I want to eat ramen, or I really like fishes, let's go. And that's like the appropriate one. And then your third one will be like, I'm late for work. Some of them are more obvious than others. As far as studying for these exams goes, there's a million different options. I work with the Nihongo Sou Matome books. They've got these cute animals on front, and they make a series covering all the different topics. There's a book for each topic, and they cover all the levels from N5 to N1, I think. Maybe they stop at N2. You can use it as quickly as you want. You can use it as slowly as you want. It's designed to teach you things in very specific lesson groups. So like one group will be the I'm moving section, and it'll teach you a bunch of kanji and vocabulary related to moving. There's the cooking section, the friendship section, you get it, so on and so forth. So I like those. Of course, there are other options. To be incredibly honest, I've worked with language textbooks a lot of my adult life, and they all pretty much tell you the same thing. It just depends on what format works for you, which book really kind of speaks to you, which one works with your brain the best. So I would suggest things like Googling different pages of the books. I mean, obviously I would not suggest that you pirate a textbook, but see if you can find little sections of the books so you can see if you like the way it's organized, like the pictures, that kind of thing, before you make your decision. Again, they're all going to pretty much teach you the same things. You just need to figure out what helps you learn the best. For kanji and a little bit of vocab, there's Wanikani, which is a website that essentially just creates online flashcards and organizes them for you and puts them on delays. Like if you get this right, you'll see it in one day. And then if you get it right again, then you'll see it in a week. And if you get it right again, you'll see it in like a couple months, so on and so forth, until it's like, okay, you remember this, we won't show it to you again. And that system is really good. It is not free, but I would say it's worth it. Weakness of it is that it doesn't organize concepts and stuff like that based on a JLPT level. So it gets less refined the more you go on, as in maybe like you'll be learning N3 and N1 kanji at the same time with Wanikani, just because that's how it organized it. Anyways, it's really useful for like ground level building, recognition of kanji, and very simple kanji as well. Like I worked in Wanikani for like 4 to 6 months or something, just passively while I was at work, and I was able to pass the kanji section of the N4 test no problem. Like legitimately, I did not have a single problem. I might have gotten like one wrong, and that wasn't from like hours of studying. That was from passively using Wanikani. So would recommend that. Of course, I'd also recommend a private tutor, but you know, that costs money and takes time. It's just a private tutor can really give you a feedback that you need when you're talking and things like that, and especially for listening recognition. So you can just build passive listening recognition. Outside of a private tutor, there's a myriad of online sources. I mean, we live in the 21st century. There's podcasts spoken in Japanese. You can find podcasts that say like designed for the N3 level, and you'll have people that talk like really slowly in Japanese about anything really, you know, there's about like maybe the Christmas market or whatever. And then on YouTube and stuff like that, you can find just straight up JLPT practice as well. Like, this is the N4 listening practice test, and you can listen to that and take it. The JLPT website itself also has some resources. Just do some Googling. As long as the source is reputable, really, there's no bad way. All exposure to language is good exposure, and you will learn from any exposure to language as long as it's like correct. So just vet it a little bit, and then it doesn't really matter. Just do your best. So that's about it. That's all I can think of. I mean, this was more of a ramble. I didn't have exactly a structured plan coming in. I just turned the camera on and started talking. So if you have any questions or want me to go further into depth in something or anything like that, just write it down in the comments and I can respond there or make another video or, you know, whatever. With all that being said, thanks for watching. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.